Hey there, everybody. This is Andre, the Game Idea Guy. Thank you for joining in for another Pitch for Switch discussion. And I'm going to go ahead and just talk about Fighters Megamix and how I think it should just go ahead and be remade or re-released for current platforms today. Now, if you own an Xbox Series or an Xbox One console, you can basically play Virtua Fighter 2, Fighting Vipers, and Sonic the Fighters on it. Or even back to the 360, because that's where all those games were released back in 2012. Actually, November of 2012. Because it was released on there, and it was also released on PS3, if I remember correctly, which makes it weird that it skipped Wii U completely, but all of those games could have been on that platform, but that wasn't the point of this discussion. The main point of this discussion is that it sits odd to me that Fighters Megamix, which is a combination of those three games plus a couple other things, didn't actually get remade and re-released during the same time period. And I know one of the reasons for that was because Fighters Megamix was specifically made for the Sega Saturn. It wasn't made for arcades, if I remember correctly, which I can understand if you go at it from that angle. It was thrown on the Saturn as like a love letter to those games and basically for fans. Only problem is it still uses the exact same engine those games use. Even on the Sega Saturn, it's still using the same engine that the arcade game uses. Well, the arcade games use. Yeah, obviously the assets are going to be downgraded a little bit for the Sega Saturn version because that's how it worked. Obviously, there was better hardware in the arcade machines for that type of display, but they made it as close to one-to-one as it could be for the Sega Saturn to the arcade versions of those games. Now, my argument would be that you could just go ahead and take the assets from the arcade versions of Virtua Fighter 2, Fighting Vipers, and Sonic the Fighters, which was basically just beak and bark. You could go ahead and use those assets for those characters and their stages to basically rebuild Fighters Megamix and release it, which they could have done at that time even then, and they could do it now today. Well, yeah, I think a couple characters might have to have some updated or similarly styled assets made, but that shouldn't be that difficult in comparison to today's technology and stuff like that. And maybe there might be one or two characters that can't be used because of licensing, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. I think it really depends on your localization. And if it isn't such a big issue, then they should just go ahead and redo it. Rent a Hero is one of the things I'm kind of questioning, because I know he was a hidden character in the game and he had a special way that he played. But I'm trying to think, like, was he Sega owned, or is he part of Sega's properties? I think he is. I just don't remember. Which, honestly, Rent a Hero itself needs like a new series to kind of expand things, but that's a whole separate beast. It's just one of those things that sits interesting to me that I would like to see. And I know that they can do it, even if it hasn't been done yet. I know it would take a bit of work and figuring out how to configure everything. And they definitely have to get the balance right, because Fighting Vipers did have some things that Virtua Fighter characters didn't. Whereas Virtua Fighter was a little bit more grounded and stable, Fighting Vipers kind of bounced you around a bit. But that's not so bad when you consider, like, they did put them in a game together. And Fighting Vipers did seem a bit more flashy than Virtua Fighter at the time. Honestly, when you play Fighting Vipers, if you look at some of the movements, they actually seem very similar to Tekken characters. You can say that about a couple of the Virtua Fighter characters, but looking at Fighting Vipers a little bit more closely, their movements do seem to be more like Tekken styled than Virtua Fighter. But again, figuring out the balancing wouldn't be that difficult, especially if they're working from what they did with Fighters Megamix. And that game had some wild characters in there, so I mean, yeah, it would be worth doing it. And another thing that they could fix is give Bark his actual theme for his level and not the flying carpet theme from Amy's stage in Sonic the Fighters. Give him his actual level theme instead of hers. Even though hers does technically match his is still better. And I don't know who made that choice or why they made that choice, but that's something that could be fixed very quickly. I mean, that's one of the simpler things to fix, to be honest. It's just like, okay, we're just swapping out the song, putting the right one in. But I would love to see that happen, because being one of the few people that owned it on the Sega Saturn, I know not a lot of people got to really experience this. And if you put it on a platform that is as widely purchased as the Switch, it would be an easy sell for about 20 to 30 bucks. And you could throw in that it was a compilation of Sega's history at that moment in time. It would be well worth the energy to go ahead and make that be the thing. So I'm just like, okay, let's do this. This shouldn't be, we have to really sit down and think about it. This is a no-brainer type of thing. And again, it is worth the time and the effort. And I know a lot of people would be appreciative of being able to play it. And that could lead into a continuation of the series where Sega starts pulling characters from other franchises and putting them in there, like from Streets of Rage, from Shinobi, Altered Beast if they wanted to. They have a multitude of different things that they could pull from and put characters in this and make it like their own version of what King of Fighters does. And I think, honestly, this came out around the same time as King of Fighters 94. So again, it makes sense to do, and it would be cool. And Sega has said, or at least a couple people from Sega have said, they wanted to make Virtua Fighter more flashy. But at the same time, you don't want to disturb away from the core of what Virtua Fighter is. So if they were to do this and then make a follow-up to it that included more stuff, that's where you could put the flashy stuff in, like the super flashy things that don't take away from the core of Virtua Fighter, but those characters can be used in an environment that allows them to be seen in that way. Again, this is just me thinking it through, and it makes a lot of sense to me, but I'm not working at Sega and I'm not in charge of any of their development. I have no say over the production of any of their games. But if I were looking at it from that standpoint and being someone working there or one of the people in charge, that's how I would think to go about it. One, drawing people's attention with Fighting Vipers and Virtua Fighter together in Fighters Megamix and re-release this game in the arcade style, using the arcade character assets from those games, as well as getting some other characters to that similar look if they weren't in an arcade game at that point, that either a Virtua Fighter or Fighting Vipers or Sonic the Fighters. Because I'm trying to think, I don't remember if Virtua Fighter Kids was in the arcade, but I do know that you have the kids version of Akira and Sarah, which are just basically super deformed, but they called it Kids at the time. So you could put those in there, and then I'm like, let's just go ahead and do that. That would be cool. And see where it leads. And it would be worth the effort. And put in the arranged soundtrack versions and not the arcade soundtrack versions. You don't have to have the sound, or you just do both. Do an original and then arranged. Because to me, honestly, the versions of the songs that were on the Sega Saturn are better than their arcade counterparts. The sound quality is a little bit better. And they also seem to have more things in the songs. Like, if you listen to them back to back, you'd notice the difference. besides just how they sound. You notice that there are a few more enhancements in the Sega Saturn version of those tracks versus the arcade version. Or yeah, they label it like that: arcade soundtrack, Saturn soundtrack, and then go from there. But I'm not going to drag this on too much more. I think I've talked enough about it. Thank you guys very much for listening. Keep your eyes and ears out for more stuff from me. And until the next time, enjoy your games and peace out, everybody. This is Andre, the Game Idea Guy, and I'd like to thank you once again for tuning in. If you would be interested in supporting my efforts in content creation, please head on over to Amazon and look up The Game Idea Guy Presents Gaming Word Search, and you will find both Volume 1 and Volume 2 up for sale. Thank you very much once again, and I hope to be able to create more content for you in the future. Peace out.